is Wednesday, April 15th, 2020, and we've reached a crucial moment in the development of the whole coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. As of today, we have a new situation where the lockdown is starting to become unlocked. In India, there are massive rioting across the entire country, largely because Narendra Modi extended the lockdown into May.
This clearly is a challenge. It's a challenge. How do you deal with this challenge? That is the critical concern. It's happened in Surat in Gujarat, Hyderabad in Telangana, Ahmedabad as well. Then it happened in Mumbai and of course in Bandra, in the Mundra area.
And what really happened in the national capital when the lockdown was announced is right now happening in Mumbai when the lockdown has been extended. So this is the desperate situation.
In doing the lockdown, he has unleashed huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of Indians who have no way of earning a living now because of the lockdown, who are in danger of starving to death because of what he's done. Just this past Sunday, there was a demonstration in Germany. Large numbers of Germans just simply walked out onto the streets defying the lockdown there. It happened in Berlin. My correspondent in Berlin took pictures. No one was arrested at that demonstration, but just yesterday, the organizer of the demonstration, a German lawyer by the name of Beate Bahner, was not only apprehended, she was handcuffed, her hands behind her back, and taken to a mental hospital where she was subjected to, in her terms, Guantanamo-like conditions. Similarly, there was a protest in Michigan. People driving to the state capitol in their cars saying that they've had enough, this thing can't go on forever, their livelihood is at stake. I'm bringing this up today because a philosophical issue has emerged in dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. In an article which appeared on the First Things website entitled Epidemic Danger and Catholic Sacraments, Reverend Thomas Joseph White denounced anyone who had doubts about the state's quarantine measures as exhibiting a misbegotten, exaggerated libertarianism, as well as exaggerated individualism, magical thinking that ignores scientific evidence, and religiously rationalized narcissism. White then claims that his position is, quote, based on a basic given of natural law. The state has a fundamental obligation to protect human life, especially when it is gravely threatened, as long as it follows both traditional time-tested procedure and proven scientific advice. Anyone who claims that public health measures may impede, quote, civil flourishing, unquote, is scientifically unrealistic and ethically irresponsible. But for the fact that Pat Buchanan's column appeared 5 days later, White's article could have been aimed at Pat Buchanan, who wrote, "For each American lost to the pandemic, 1,000 Americans have lost their jobs because of conscious and deliberate decisions of the president and 50 governors. Some 60,000 citizens, we are told, will be likely lost in this pandemic. Are we prepared to accept 60 million unemployed to mitigate those losses? While the daily losses of Americans to the virus appears to be leveling off 1/3 of the way to that 60,000 figure, the other losses from the social and economic devastation we have invited upon ourselves have just begun to mount and will continue far longer. Is it ethically responsible, to get back to White's narrative, to bring up a point like this? In making his point, Father White presents us with a classic example of ahistorical Thomism, presenting abstract categories which can only have meaning in an article on a current crisis if they are contextualized according to time and place. To give one instance, what does Father White mean by the state at a moment like this, when the power of the state is being usurped by experts like Bill Gates, who speak in the name of science as a way of abrogating representative government? Is it causing division to bring up points like this, or is the division already there? Nor is it helpful, Father White tells us, to utter the tone-deaf claim that the COVID-19 pandemic is not so bad and that people are overreacting. People are not overreacting when they grieve as their patients, friends, or family members die by the thousands. But what if thousands are not dying? Today, the New York Times announced that New York City has added 3,700 names to the list of people who have died from the coronavirus, simply because of some conjecture on the part of health officials. These people were not tested. What if the statistics are inflated?
As a physician, I received an email last week from the Department of Health. They were saying, you don't have to have a confirmed laboratory test for COVID-19 in order to make the death certificate be COVID-19. So
Wait. Sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that and what you just said, I think is critically important. Can you repeat what you just said, please?
Well, last Friday, I received a 7-page document that sort of told me that if I had an 86-year-old patient that had pneumonia but was never tested for COVID-19, but sometime after she came down with pneumonia, we learned that she had been exposed to her son who had no symptoms, but later on was identified with COVID-19, that it would be appropriate to diagnose on the death certificate COVID-19.
Why would they want to skew the number of deaths due to COVID-19?
Well, fear is a great way to control people.
What if the consequences of the cure are worse than the medical consequences of the disease? What about contextualizing the pandemic geographically? So far, only one person has died in St. Joseph County, where I live. Why then should the government impose New York standards where they do not apply? Is this why the United States is divided into states? Father White claims that Christians ought to treat this pandemic as an opportunity to learn more about God and what they can do to console both their religious and secular neighbors. What about consoling the economically vulnerable who have lost their jobs? What about the people in India who face starvation because of Modi's lockdown? What about the debate about how long the quarantine is supposed to last? Is it spiritually corrosive to engage in that debate? Ahistorical Thomism fits in well with a supine attitude toward the state and science, but it doesn't get to the heart of the matter in dealing with something as geographically particular and time-bound as the corona pandemic. The answer to all of these questions is prudence, the ability to recognize the truth and to act on it. In this particular context, that means the ability to answer a series of specific questions like, who speaks for the state? Is it Donald Trump or Bill Gates? Who speaks for science? Is it Anthony Fauci, the mouth of Big Pharma, or a host of German professors who say the pandemic is over and draconian measures are no longer necessary? Who decides when the epidemic is over? The experts or officials elected by the people? How does the president, to give just one example of a head of state, decide between the claims of competing experts? The answer is logos in the form of prudence. Everyone has logos because, as Aquinas might have put it, everyone is a rational animal. Universal access to logos is the basis of representative government. Imprudent decisions by public officials have unleashed crises in places like Michigan, whose Attorney General, Dana Nessel, just happens to be a lesbian. Lesbians do not make effective leaders because their vice blocks access to logos, darkens their minds, and renders their decisions either ineffective or unnecessarily draconian because of the lack of prudence behind them. Logos is the antidote to the cabal of CEOs and homosexuals who now rule us imprudently with an iron rod of their own making, because it takes political power out of the hands of the oligarchs and their experts and puts it back into the hands of the people where it belongs in a democracy. For more information on the coronavirus pandemic, visit culturewars.com. Make sure you share this video with family and friends, and make sure you subscribe to the Culture Wars channel on YouTube.